Some of the nation's top teachers recently gathered in El Paso, Texas, to speak out against the U.S. government's practice of detaining children who cross into this country from Mexico, and to see that they get the support they need when they return to the classroom. Special correspondent Kavitha Cardoza of our partner, Education Week, was there, and she filed this report. It's part of our weekly education series, Making the Grade.
All children deserve to be free.
Mandy Manning, this year's National Teacher of the Year, dismisses the idea that educators should not be involved in politics.
Educators are mandatory reporters of suspected abuse. And how we are dealing with immigration right now is abusive. We're taking children and we are putting them into facilities, incarcerating them, simply because they were born outside of the United States.
Several state teachers of the year agree.
When I was 12 years old, I was undocumented, and because of the DACA program, I was actually able to work as a teacher, and I am now the 2018 New Mexico Teacher of the Year.
What happens in one area of the country impacts all of us. And so even though in my rural community I may not necessarily see these problems manifest, they still belong to us as Americans.
This part of West Texas is the epicenter of President Trump's hardline immigration policies. One shelter in particular has drawn a lot of attention. It's about 35 miles from El Paso in a small, sleepy border town called Tornillo. I'm standing on the U.S. side of the U.S. Mexico border, and right behind me you can see one of the official ports of entry. Here in Tornillo, Texas, is where the tent city used to be. Now, this was initially started as a temporary shelter, about 350 beds to accommodate unaccompanied children who were crossing the border. But it quickly expanded to more than 10 times the number of beds, and at its peak, it was the largest shelter for migrant children in the country. It's closed down now, but there are still approximately 100 shelters across the U.S. Mandy Manning says if this shelter can close down, so can others.
I see the closing of Tornillo as the beginning, because it shows that our government has the ability and the capacity to close these facilities. We're just choosing not to.
The Department of Health and Human Services, which oversees detained migrant children, declined an on-camera interview. In an email, a spokesperson wrote the shelters are run consistent with federal law and are necessary to house the thousands of children who arrive every year until sponsors can be vetted. Children have access to medical care, psychological services, recreation, and education. Jessica Vaughn advocates for stricter immigration policy. She's at the Center for Immigration Studies.
The understanding of many people in Central America was that if an adult shows up at the border with a child, they would be treated differently. They would be allowed to enter the country. And not only did this motivate a lot of parents to come with a child, it also led some of the smuggling organizations to try to game the system by providing their clients with a child to use to try to get through our system. So in a way, the child was serving as a deportation shield.
Linda Rivas disagrees that children are being used as shields. She's an attorney with Las Americas Immigrant Advocacy Center.
Well, it's absolutely not true. Our clients, almost all of them, are escaping some form of violence. Some of them are escaping domestic violence. Some of them are escaping other forms of persecution.
Hola, ¿cómo está?
Rivas is speaking to a client who was separated from her children when she crossed the border to seek asylum. The mother, who's since been deported back to Honduras, hasn't seen her children in more than a year.
At night, I would dream that we were together, and then I would wake up to the reality again that we were not. My children need me, and I'm not there. This is the hardest thing that a mother should ever have to go through.
When a federal judge forced the government to reunite separated children with relatives, her two sons, along with thousands of other migrant children, were moved from shelters to family members all over the country. Her sons are now living with a relative and are attending public school.
My hope is for them to study. In my country, they couldn't. They can hardly read because we were so scared that we had to continue moving them from school to school. Now, I just hope that they're able to meet their goals and that they're able to finish school.
Research shows these detained children suffer high rates of post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, depression, and behavioral problems. Experts found even a brief detention can cause psychological trauma and induce long-term health risks for children. Sarahi Monterey says she sees these effects of trauma in her classroom. Students say they're sad, can't concentrate, or have stomach aches.
It's very difficult for students to learn, and it's very hard because sometimes even as an educator, it's hard to find the right words of what to say because sometimes I do feel helpless.
But at this event, she's found information and resources she can take back and share with other teachers. Mandy Manning says she hopes teachers continue to speak out.
We shouldn't just stay in our classrooms. We're teachers. We should be speaking for all kids.
For the PBS NewsHour and Education Week, I'm Kavitha Cardoza in El Paso, Texas.